Welcome to Money Matters. I am Emily Johnson, joined as always by DCrowell, and we've been discussing, most recently, interest rates, the impact of the possibility of repatriation of funds, tax acts, and all of those things when it comes to the market and your 401ks, IRAs, and other investments in the market. So when we left, you were discussing the possibility of, or what the impact was going to be on the local market should we see a repatriation of funds and thus, drastically lower interest rates, presumably.
Yes. I mean, there are 3 or 4 drivers of this economy, economic drivers of this economy, that impact all of us who live here and that we notice every day. The first of those is the tourists who come here. This is a resort island, and there's a steady influx of tourism. What do we know about it today, 2017, spring 2017? What we know about it is that over the last 3 or 4 years, Hilton Head has become almost a 12-month destination. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's at 10 months and climbing at the moment, and that's absolutely remarkable. From when I moved here, which was 20 years ago, it was a well-known national destination, tourist destination, but it was a 6-month destination. That swing to 10 months and pressing is absolutely amazing. What it's done is to make the local resort economy a boom, and the Chamber of Commerce has presented us with numbers year over year that show rentals at all-time highs, dollars of spending per visitor at all-time highs. We're about to go through a complete renovation and renaissance of Caligny Plaza. I mean, that is exciting. The money's flowing, and the tourists are spending it. The second big one is retirees. They're the great source of money that comes here, buys real estate, and then stays here and spends the money that they've brought with them. How is life for retirees? Well, incrementally, slowly but surely, the real estate values have increased. Portfolios, if the retiree has a portfolio, mm-hmm. portfolios have gained since 2009 almost threefold. Right. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah? I mean, and stable and climbing.
Assuming that they stayed in.
Assuming that they stayed in the market. But the problem is yield.
Right. So the negative side of low interest rates is, of course, for the savers, because savers are not generating the types of yields that they would like to save. I have had this meeting in my office about 3 times this week already with individuals that are just very risk averse, either because they remember 2007 through 2009, or they've always been very risk averse and conservative, and so are sitting on laddered CDs that right now are paying 1%, 2% for a 5-year CD is good, things like that. And yes, we have very low inflation right now, but the things that we actually, from a CPI level, it looks like we have low inflation. However, the things that people actually use, like healthcare, like food, things like that, they're inflating a lot faster than our assumed 2% inflation rate. So when I'm talking to somebody that literally has 95% of their portfolio in CDs and money markets yielding between 1% and 2%, there's no way that they're keeping up with inflation. So those individuals have to make sure that they're keeping their expenses down, which you can control to a large extent until you can't. Until something happens either to your home or to your health or something like that. So when we're making these recommendations and putting a plan in place, we have to assume that there is going to be a tick up in those expenses, not just from an inflationary perspective, but also something will happen. It could be a downdraft in the market. It could be needing to go into a rehabilitation facility. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. So any of these things can really wreak havoc on a fixed income portfolio, which is what a lot of retirees do depend on, and it's also what a lot of people are more comfortable with. So trying to get people over the hump of understanding that we're building a portfolio for 30, 40 years, and that so that we can withstand whatever that blip is going to be, because that blip will happen, is necessary, and that typically involves taking some funds and putting them in an equity or a growth-oriented market, that's tough to get people to do when they had thought 20 years ago that they would build up a portfolio and then live off of 5% income from it for the rest of their years.
Right.
And that reality is, it's not for some people. It can be, depending on how much was saved, but what I'm finding for most people is it's much more about controlling expenses and figuring out how to do that in advance of retiring, and that's no fun. So discussing budgeting with somebody who's now about to retire and is really excited about the new cruises that they're going to take and
right.
and going to see the grandkids 6 times a year versus 2 times a year, they don't like talking about the fact that we have to budget.
That they can't spend any money.
Right. So then the financial plan, instead of becoming something that is opens up their eyes to, oh, hey, this is something that I can do, becomes more of a drag of, oof, I have to budget suddenly again. And it's a balance between the two.
That's a tough reality.
Yeah.
That's a tough reality. I see the same thing on my side. Folks who are in the retirement mode have Social Security, 2 Social Security incomes coming in, maybe a small pension from one or another of the jobs that they've had over their lives. So add 2 Social Securities and the very small pension, and the household has about $50,000. They really wanted about 80 or 90. That means that the portfolio in total income, because they've got a modest house that they bought at the right time in Hilton Head Plantation or wherever, and they're set up for a retirement. But they really need $80,000 or $90,000 a year in order to make everything happen in retirement that they would hope to do.
Right.
This is not to live lavishly. This is just to feel financially free in retirement. Right. That means they need an extra $40,000 to $50,000 from somewhere.
Well, and taxes are the other
and
portion of that.
That's a big bite.
Yeah.
That's a big bite.
Especially when the bulk of
go ahead.
No, just when the bulk. What I find too, just like what you're saying, is you have Social Security and maybe a pension from teaching or something like that up north. You see that all the time, but then largely people have saved money in their 401ks, and if that's their biggest asset, then they start taking income out of the IRA. It's all fully taxed. So trying to help people early on to develop sort of a tax variation in their assets, so that they have, say, Roth IRA, taxable investments, and a 401k, and putting money in each of those pockets early enough on so that we can vary their income in retirement instead of having to take the full $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 out of what becomes an IRA and then becomes fully taxable and jacks your tax bracket up along with your Social Security and your pension income. It makes a big difference.
There's going to be taxes. What you're trying to do when you balance those things out is you're trying to play your marginal tax rate.
Exactly.
So you're saying, gee, if I sneak under this level or that level, then my marginal tax rate goes from 25% down to 15%.
Well, it's the same thing that we're seeing with the Affordable Care Act that is still there, and who knows. So with the Affordable Care Act, if you're under 65, you're trying to keep your income at a certain level so that you can pay less for your health care. That's just what happens when you have, then it's driven by income. And so what I'm finding there is we're needing to keep income low, which also means that we're not necessarily placing sales because that generates capital gains. It means that folks who have big 401ks that have to take the required minimum distributions and then take more on top of it, that might drive them into a higher tax bracket and thus out of the Affordable Care low range. So there's lots of different little levers that are challenging.
And when you need extra cash but you don't want it to be taxable, that becomes the trick. You've got to pull it out of your already taxed stock brokerage account or your Roth.
But I feel like at the end of the day, you always do pay the piper. So it's good to have pre-planning, and it's good to plan and when you can. But anything that is reinventing the wheel, you will end up having to pay the piper at some point. So if it's something that's going to be a short-term solution that becomes a long-term nightmare, you probably want to think twice about that, because you will have to pay the taxes at some point. That will happen. Maybe they'll be lower at some point, but it's unlikely if you're in.
And then the third big variable that's coming our way is the one that we've been predicting for several years now, and it's hitting. And that is that the baby boom really truly is retiring. The baby boom started retiring 5 years ago, and only a trickle came and a trickle came. It's now happening in volume. Inventories in the real estate market are tightening up. What happens after inventories tighten up? Prices start going up. So I expect to be standing here sometime in the next 3 or 4 months and reporting higher prices.
All right. So we will come back and see if that prediction holds true. I'm kind of right there with you. Until next week, please check us out on Facebook. Send us your ideas, thoughts. We always love to hear from you. And we'll be back next week with more Money Matters.